Hi everyone. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded. Trust me, I haven't forgotten about you. Honestly, you guys have all been really thinking about, and I apologize for the long wait time. There's just been a few things that's been going on that I had to shift my focus towards. Not more important things, but dire things. Things that needed a little more time to figure out, and unfortunately, it was time that I had to take away from recording. I really do apologize because, I love doing this and I love all the support and just love knowing that there are people that love listening. It means the world to me. You guys do. But I've just been focusing on my job, and I was sick for an entire week, so that contributes. But I've been working on the studio to try and make the sound quality as crisp and polished as it could possibly be for, my current living situation as of now without spending a fuckload of money. But I hope you enjoyed today's stories as much as I did reading them. And I just wanted to clarify and, say why I've been absent for the past while. I woke up from a nap in my mother's room. It was around 11 p.m. because I saw the time on my mother's AM radio, and when I went into the dining room, the 11 o'clock news was on. I called out to my mother and siblings. No answer. I walked to the back door and looked out to see my stepfather working on the family car. I turned around, and through the dining room, the kitchen, and the living room, I could see a light coming from the hallway that led to the bedrooms. The hallway had a high ceiling, so I could immediately tell it wasn't the hallway on, because the light looked more like something glowing in the hallway. I started to walk towards the hallway and made it into the kitchen when I see my sister come out of the hallway, and I now see that she is glowing. She's wearing this nightgown, and she usually wore to bed, but she was 100% glowing. I called out to her. No reply. She tilted her head to the side, and I approached more and was now standing in the doorway of the kitchen room. She never moved from the doorway of the hallway. I couldn't see below her knees at this time, because the doorways weren't exactly across from each other and the angle she was at. Her lower half was behind the edge of the couch. I said something else to her. At this point, annoyed that she was acting weird, and I walked into the living room. Again, she said nothing and tilted her head. Then she started to back up into the hallway and motioned with her finger for me to follow. So I did. She gets a few feet into the hallway, still motioning for me to follow and, glowing, and I got around 9 feet away from her and could see her lower half. She had no legs and was just floating. The bottom of her nightgown flowed around with no resistance, hitting nothing because her legs were not there. She kept motioning for me to follow, but at this point, I was hurriedly backing up and lost sight of her as I reached the doorway of the room. The glow from her completely disappeared when I lost sight of her. It didn't fade. It was just gone. The instant the glow was gone, I heard the familiar bang of the metal door of the pizza shop slamming closed, and I ran to the back door of the apartment to look out, and there I see my mother, my younger brother, and my older sister, who was in completely different clothing. I was stunned. I had no idea what I saw. I didn't go back into that hallway or my bedroom for at least a week. I told my family about this, and they all have no explanation. My sister is still alive to this day. I don't know if it was a ghost or a demon or what, but it completely freaked me out. Couple of things to mention. I was 1000% awake. I wasn't hallucinating. I never saw whatever that was again, and as far as I know, nobody saw it either. So this happened a few years ago during the day while my mom and I were in the car. Been looking for an explanation for years now, but I still don't have one. We were driving on a 50-kilometer road back home with one car in front of us when we both saw a man walking towards the road to cross it. As we kept looking at the man, who is at this point was standing on the road, we started to scream at each other, since the car in front of us did not see this man, although it was like 2 p.m. on a sunny day. The car in front of us just kept driving, and at that point, my mom parked our car on the side of the road looking for what we expected to be a very injured man. Needless to say, we were both shocked when there was no man to be found at all. The car in front of us should have full-on hit this man with a speed of 50 kilometers, but somehow, this mystery man vanished. We looked around in the area for a while to see if we could find someone that looked like this man, but no. There was no logical reason for why my mom and I both saw the exact same man walking, but there wasn't anyone there. This happened about 5 years ago, and it lasted for a couple weeks. Then, it never happened again. I never figured out what it was, and seeing some stories made me want to share to see if anyone had experienced something similar. For info, I sleep relatively well. I wake up often during the night, but I can normally fall back asleep. I never suffered intense insomnia or anything of the sort. It started with little things. I would wake up during the night and see some strange things. The first time it was pipes all over the walls and the ceiling, as if I was in an unfinished basement. It took a couple of seconds, maybe minutes, but they faded away. I thought I was sleeping, but with my eyes open, maybe. One night, it was spiders, hundreds of them, everywhere on the walls. This made me take my phone to open the flashlight to see if I was hallucinating. Once again, it lasted only a few seconds and then faded away. This typically happened during the night, never when falling asleep, always when waking up. I could move and talk, so I wasn't experiencing sleep paralysis. Then I started seeing shadows. People, mostly in the corner of my room. I would have to blink a couple times and really stare at it to make sure it was really there. The last time it happened, I woke up on my back, and someone was sitting on me. A dark shadow, kneeling on top of me, staring at me. At this point, I was so scared, I just hid under my blanket. I remember being scared shitless, lifting my blanket over my head and staying there for as long as I possibly could until I felt safe again to come out. Then, it never happened again. Has anyone experienced something similar? I looked into sleep paralysis, like I said, but a common symptom is that you're paralyzed and can't move, which was not my case. I was a kid, around 10 years old, and when I walked into my room, I saw a really strange looking shadow on the blue curtains that I have, which was normally not there. It looked like a shadow of some kind of a stick, around 1 meter long and 10 centimeters wide, and it stayed there. Keep in mind that this shadow be such of an object which is inside the room, since it was reflecting on the curtain, so it must have been something between the lamp and the curtain. I was shocked, because there was nothing in between and the shadow did not disappear. It continued staying at the curtain. So I opened up the curtain to check whether this is something outside, but nothing. There was nothing in between. No insect at the lamp or something that might resemble a stick-looking shadow. So I literally got scared as fuck and called my father to check what is going on, and at that moment, he appeared and went close to the curtains to inspect. There was a sound outside like someone dropped a 10-kilogram hammer on the cement road, and the shadow disappeared at the same damn moment. From then on, I have not had this kind of frightening experience, but I will remember that one for good. Ever since I was a kid, people told me I had a great imagination, but honestly, I find it very difficult to create images or people in my mind. When I was about 7 years old, I had this friend who would always ask me to sleep over because she said her house had way too many shadows for her liking. Mind you, she was maybe 10 years old at the time and had some mental health problems like schizophrenia, so I never thought much of it until we had a sleepover at her house. She used to be my neighbor, so I still see the house every day, and it does have a creepy look since it's very old. Back then, she lived there with her stepfather, brother, mother, and sister, and often stayed home alone. So she wouldn't feel bad or scared. I always spent my days there with her. We decided randomly one day I should sleep over, since she didn't want to be alone with her stepfather and her half-sister. The guy decided to spend the day with his daughter and left us at the house, saying he'd come back later. We spent the day playing some games and then decided to play in the backyard that is connected to a little forest on our neighborhood. After playing volleyball for a while, she said very suddenly we should get inside. She was kind of freaked out, and I knew she would sometimes see things that weren't there, so I just followed her inside. Right after we went inside, we heard someone outside the house. It was just the girl next door who wanted to get in. I remember vividly how relieved I felt until we opened the back door and the girl ran inside. She said there was a tall, black man outside, and being little logical me, I said she shouldn't be racist. The girl pointed out the window and I saw him. I don't know honestly. It was a really tall black figure marching to the backyard. I couldn't see its face, just the back. We decided to hide in the spare bathroom, lock the door and hide in the shower. But then the window broke and the door handle fell, and we were really freaked out. We were all kids, and the girl said it could just be a drunkard or another kid playing a joke on us. But I said it was better if we hid until the stepfather came home. When he did get home, we were all three crying in the shower, hugging each other and shivering because, damn, that shower was cold. The girl went home and never played with us again. And that day, me and my friend slept on that house. Now, years later, I was home alone. My friend moved out some years ago, and we've lost contact. I was gaming with my cousin on call when my old dog, that had been sleeping for an hour or so, started barking at the door. He doesn't bark if it isn't an intruder or the neighbor's dog that he hates. I calmed the dog down. I looked out the door window and there it was. My cousin asked me what happened, and I just couldn't answer because I thought that this thing was just my little kid self's imagination. I could see its front. It had no face, but I could just feel it was looking at me. My dog had his tail down, and that's not common because he's a hunter. He's almost never scared unless it's fireworks. My cousin panicked, and I told him about the thing that was staring at me from outside the house. My door window has this black cover on the glass so no one can see the house from outside. And it freaks me out so much that this thing was staring at me through the cover. I blinked and it disappeared. And I cried so much after that. I was a teenager, home alone, in a not that peaceful neighborhood. I called my mom and asked her to look at the cameras, but she said she found nothing. The cameras move if someone passes by, but Mom said the cameras didn't move since she went to work that morning. I spent the week at my grandma's house shortly after that. And last week, I saw it again. I have protection sigils on my doorstep. I have mirrors closed from any spiritual portals, and I've recently done a protection spell on my room. So, I've never seen anything like that figure again at home. But I saw it at school. My school is very big, and we have this abandoned building that caught fire once, and since then we use it as a hanging out place because there are no cameras there. Me and my friends were playing volleyball in an abandoned classroom there because we didn't feel like having PE class that day. And then my friends decided they would make out there, and I was grossed out, so I left them there and made my way out of the building. And then I saw it. It was right there with them. I saw it through the open hole that once was a window. I panicked, called my other friend, and when she got there, she said she didn't see anything. We headed to the abandoned classroom again. And when asked, my friends said they didn't see anything either. No wonder. Really, they're very dense. Some days I had to go look out of the window of the school bus, and I saw it again. My ex-boyfriend told me some more months ago that he had this weird, creepy feeling following him for some time. Now I feel it too. Like there's always something behind my shoulders, like something's watching me. But every time I look back, there's no one. Please, tell me I'm not crazy, and maybe it is just my imagination. But I think this thing has been watching me for weeks. My youngest dog has been very scared recently too, and he's never been like that. He looks exactly like my other dog was in the door incident. I felt it once on my vacation. I was with my cousin on our grandma's house, and we felt something pushing us down while we were laying on the bed. He told me he'd never felt it before, and a week after that, we saw it on the window of our Airbnb in a place we've never been before. He cried and couldn't sleep the whole night. I don't know if it's multiple shadow thingies following me, or if it's just accidental encounters, or if it's the same person that I've seen. I'm into witchcraft and I'm pagan, so I usually do protection spells and spell jars. 3 of my clear quartz have been broken this week. So please, someone, tell me if you know what I've experienced and who or what those things were. When I was younger, probably the age between 5 or 15, I always felt that I was very sensitive to the paranormal, or whatever it was that was on the other side or spiritual plane. There were a number of reasons for this. One of them being that I always had a strong feeling that I was being watched or followed, and it really felt like someone was literally walking directly behind me and looking down at me, as in directly down my neck. or just that I wasn't alone in my house. I'd always check behind me several times as I got this feeling, but there was never anything there. It did happen in other houses. The feeling was strongest when I walked down the stairs and into the kitchen, and I don't know why. I never saw anything. It was always only just a feeling. I also suffered from night terrors and nightmares really badly. I could never go to sleep at night and not have a horrible nightmare or night terror, and they were always the same. It was either me running from something or someone, but it always ended up getting caught, or it was hiding from someone or something. Or the worst ones were where I would be somewhere in my bed, usually, sitting up and seeing things coming towards me. I specifically remember dark black shadows crawling on the floor with like shiny holes for eyes or something. And I wouldn't try and call for my mom, but when I opened my mouth, nothing would come out. I tried my hardest, tried to scream with all my energy, but it was just air. I would try to move and couldn't. I don't know if this was sleep paralysis, because I never thought it was since I wasn't awake. I was so sure I was dreaming. I was really young, so maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I was literally terrified to sleep. Some nights I would lay awake all night to just not sleep and have a nightmare. I tried to tell my parents about it, but they just thought that I was just trying to get into their beds, as I would always end up asking to sleep in their bed because I was scared. Every night it happened. I would wake up and ask to get in their bed. They did take me to the doctors, but the doctors said it was just normal childhood, and nothing came from it after that. I would wake up terrified, crying sometimes. Even when I tried to go back to sleep, the nightmare would just come where it left off. It was always being trapped somewhere, like a wardrobe or something, hiding from someone, or I'd be running from someone or something, and it was the most terrifying thing. I'd often wake up crying, sweating, and just terrified to close my eyes because whenever I did, the nightmare would just restart from where it left off. The only time this didn't happen was when I slept in the bed as someone else. This went on for years, but I learned to accept it, especially as I got older. And as I got older, it lessened and lessened, and it rarely happens now. When it does, I just go on my phone when I wake up until I get tired again. I also have the ability to lucid dream naturally. If I have a scary dream at this age, I just shut my eyes and concentrate really hard. Picture my room, and then I'll wake up. When I was 13 or 14, I went on a family holiday and we were staying with some relatives. This was my first time going to see their relatives. After a long day of traveling, we arrived at about 10 p.m. It was one of those houses where, as you enter, you are in a living room and there was no hallway. As soon as I walked down into the house, I stopped just past the doorway as something felt very, very off. I felt a very heavy, thick cloud of energy engulfing me as I was, quite frankly, freaked the fuck out. My mom immediately asked me what was wrong as I stood, completely still, and carefully eyed the room. And I said to her that something was really wrong in here. I continued looking around the room, trying to locate where this feeling was coming from until I felt drawn to the area around where the sofa was. I struggled to figure out what that feeling was. It was an even stronger sensation than what I felt at home or around the house. I don't know where this came from or why I asked, but I then asked her if someone died in this house and was specifically referring to the area around the sofa as that's where the energy was emanating from. She looked at me and didn't say anything for a few seconds before she replied, saying that she didn't want to say anything before because she didn't want me to get scared, but then told me that actually my relative's husband died a few days before we arrived. I think it was an unexpected heart attack or in his sleep or something, and he died on that sofa. I spent as little time as possible in that living room, and as soon as I went into one of the bedrooms or the kitchen or any other room in the house, the feeling went away, considering it was likely the energy of her husband. I can't understand why the feeling was so heavy and unsettling, unless he was not at peace for some reason. Things started to settle a bit after this happened. The intense feelings got less and less, and so did the nightmares, and I began to get less scared of the nightmares as I got older. We ended up moving from house to house, and the one that gave me the weird feelings, and I never felt anything in the new house we moved to. Sometimes at my grandma's, I get this hint of it, but it's mild. Sometimes though, I do get things that go missing and then turn up in odd places, or random things that just fall around with no explanation in the house. Like a few bottles of shower gel flew off of the stairs in the middle of the night one night, and we found them in front of the door in the morning. Does anyone have any ideas what might have been going on with me when I was a child? Was it sleep paralysis or something else? Was I just hypersensitive to the paranormal? How could I sense that someone had died in the room? And what were those horrible feelings on my neck and back I used to get? As I get older, I'm genuinely curious, and I don't feel like this anymore, so I'm curious to know what's different. Can spirits be attached to a place of work or where they died? There are several places that I went to school or been inside that are supposedly haunted. When I was a little girl, the elementary school I went to always gave off a creepy vibe on the second floor. The feeling you were being watched. Later on, I was told that the second floor is supposedly haunted by a girl in a pink shirt. The bathrooms on that floor always scared me, and I usually used the ones on the first floor. The school also burned down at one point when it was a high school, and allegedly, the cafeteria worker left a pot of coffee on and it short-circuited. The school was several years old before it burned. A now abandoned elementary school, let's call it H Elementary, was a high school at one point, and apparently some residents haven't left. My father now works in the elementary, which was converted into a military school, and my mother attended the school when it was still open and worked in it for a couple years as a teacher. My mother told me her experiences on top floor, and when she was a staff member there, it is supposedly haunted by an old teacher. My mother reportedly felt like she was being watched. Door handles jiggling on their own, the sound of footsteps, supposedly the sound of heels, and lockers being slammed. This was some odd years ago in the early 2000s. My father and other staff members now have heard the same things my mother and several others have heard. There's no way animals could have gone into the building and stayed there, as both floors were occupied at the time. A now also abandoned high school is supposedly haunted by a man who fell into a stove burner in the basement, but it is rumored that he was allegedly murdered by stab wounds on his back. I was having a hard time falling asleep one night, a few weeks back, and I was trying hard to quiet my thoughts. Sometimes, when I struggle to sleep, I'll do a meditation session in bed to attempt to quiet my brain enough to sleep. When I do this, I will imagine any thought that I have as a thought bubble from a comic strip, and I will imagine myself just taking my finger and popping the thought bubble, so that thought I started to have just disappears. As I was doing this, the name Florence Zener popped into my head, and I have never ever heard anything remotely resembling that name before, so I have zero idea why I would think of it. Right at that moment, one of my kids came into my room to crawl into bed with me, and since I was more alert now, I opened the notes app on my phone and typed the name out thinking I would follow up on it later. Well, life happens and I just forgot to Google the name as it had honestly slipped my mind entirely. Tonight, I opened the notes app again to look for something and I saw the name that I had written down, so I thought, what the heck? And I Googled it. Much to my surprise, there was an actual person with that name, and it seems to be a unique enough name that there is only one exact match, and one other woman with the last name of Zener that had Florence as a middle name, so I suppose one could argue that would be a possible match as well. This woman passed away in 1996 and lived in Pennsylvania. I have no connection to Florence Zener or any other Zener for that matter, nor can I even recall ever meeting someone with that name or even hearing it in my life. I have no idea where this name came from and what I'm supposed to do about it. It feels like she whispered her name to me in an attempt to communicate something, but I don't know, that sounds bonkers. I suppose I need to look further into this woman and see what I find. Any advice on resources to do so that would help me? That would be much appreciated. We are a very spiritual family. We believe in the supernatural. Not my mom not telling me their new house has a ghost. I was visiting my mom a month ago and I'm sitting on the bed while she's ironing her clothes. We were just talking. I watched a light in her room turn on, which is fine. I thought my brother was playing with us because we were taking too long. Cut to a few moments later, my mom is like, "Did you switch the light on?" I say no, but I watched it go on. She says nonchalantly, "Oh, it's Frank. He is our ghost." Like, what? My mother never told me, and they have been in that house for months. You think you know people. But my mother says he is friendly and just likes to be known. Being the first time I spent a week in there, I see why he decided to show himself. Apparently, he likes to follow us around. I've never been one to be scared of ghosts or energies despite believing in them, but this last week something has been seriously off. My family has lived in the house I've been staying at since I left my abusive ex for 20 years. The house was completely new, and when my parents moved in the neighborhood, it was still being constructed. My mom has always said that there was something in this house, as both me and my sister would point to corners in the nursery and say, "Grandma." My mom's mom passed away when she was 20. She would now be 56, and always figured we were talking about her. My family left for a trip about 3 days ago. I felt an eerie feeling, like the entire house I knew was alone. It knew there were no dogs or family around. The first day they left, I heard someone coming down the stairs, and I figured someone had to come home because they forgot something. I went upstairs to see if anyone was home, yelling, "Hello?" No one was there. I went downstairs, brushing it off as paranoia. 2 minutes later, I heard someone run up the stairs, and now I was spooked. Every door was locked, alarm was on, My spiritual friends last night all witnessed this with me. I had some colleague friends over, and we sat chatting in the living room. A light right by my head turned off, while all the others dimmed out. The three of us were sitting, meaning there was no way that someone had turned them off. My friend started crying. A man who would never cry out of being scared. He stood up and said he couldn't be in the house anymore and left with no goodbye. At this point, I'm shitting my pants. Later that night, I took a salt bath, attempting to relax and cleanse my energy. While I was there, every single, and I mean every single Alexa in my house went off, one by one. I heard it start downstairs faintly, then hit every room in the house, working its way up to the room I was bathing, alone and naked. Since then, doors slam, lights turn off, and I'm still here alone. Every night, I have a nightmare, and I woke up at exactly 3:33 last night. How can I remedy this? And how can I get rid of any of these objects with intense energy? Thank you everyone for listening. If your story was told, I'm glad I'm the one who could tell it. I appreciate all the love and support, and I hope you enjoyed today's stories as much as I did reading them.